Hey everyone, this is Ma'am Syra, and for this session, we will discuss about human flourishing. This is the first topic in chapter 2 of STS and the human condition. Okay, so human flourishing, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify different conceptions of human flourishing. Number 2, determine the development of the scientific method and validity of science. And lastly, critique human flourishing vis-a-vis progress of science and technology to be able to define for themselves the meaning of a good life. So let us begin our discussion with this question. What is happiness? Of course, all of us wants or aims to be happy. Gusto natin sa buhay natin, masaya tayo. Kasi magaan sa pakiramdam. But if you're going to define it, what is happiness? Now, we have here sample definition of happiness in the different field. In psychology, for example, happiness is defined as a mental or emotional state of well-being which can be defined, among others, a positive or pleasant emotions ranging from contentment to intense joy. So that is happiness. On the other hand, to behaviorists, happiness is a cocktail of emotions we experience when we do something good or positive. So that is also happiness. Okay, in the field of behaviorism, when we do something good or positive, we are happy. In a more scientific definition to a neurologist, okay, happiness is the experience of a flood of hormones released in the brain as a reward for behavior that prolongs survival. So, mas deep ang definition scientifically, but that is also referring to happiness, the flood of happy hormones, okay, released by the brain as a reward for behavior that prolongs survival. So these are some definitions of happiness in the different schools of thought. Now the next question is happiness a destination or a journey? Ang happiness ba ay yung patutunguhan mo? Or ang mismong daan habang papunta ka doon sa patutunguhan mo? Okay, medyo deep ano? Now, before you answer that, let's have the different conceptions of happiness. Okay, so from the hedonistic view of well-being is that happiness is the polar opposite of suffering. Okay, so the presence of happiness indicates the absence of pain. Okay, as simple as that. Because of this, hedonists believe that the purpose of life is to maximize happiness, which minimizes misery. So kapag walang pain, absence of pain, it means that you are happy. That is in the view of hedonist or hedonia. Ginagamit din yung term nun. On the other hand, we have this term eudaimonia, a term that combines the Greek word for good and spirit to describe the ideology. So what is eudaimonia? Eudaimonia defines happiness as the pursuit of becoming a better person. Eudaimonists do this by challenging themselves intellectually or by engaging in activities that makes them spiritually richer people. So, kung titignan natin yung dalawang view, sila yung opposite ng bawat isa. The hedonia and eudaimonia. Remember po that this term eudaimonia combines from the Greek words good and spirit. Okay, yan. Inulit lang yung slide. Now, eudaimonia is said to be good-spirited. Remember, its origin from the Greek words good and spirit. So, it is good-spirited. Term coined by Greek philosopher Aristotle to describe the pinnacle of happiness that is attainable by humans. So, during this period, at their time, yan yung kumbaga goal ng humanity. Okay? To achieve the pinnacle of happiness. So, often been translated to human flourishing. So, that is what we are talking about, the human flourishing. So, paano natin? It is actually para siyang ikinukumpara sa humans and a flower. Okay? So, in literature, sabi doon, achieving their full bloom for flowers. Sa tao, meron din. Kapag na-achieve mo yung full bloom mo, then it is said to be you are flourishing or human flourishing. Okay? So, yan. So, looking at this image, ginagamit ito to describe the fulfilled life, yung eudaimonia na tinutukoy ni Aristotle. On the y-axis, nandyan yung view ng mga hedonist or hedonia to feel good, okay, the pleasure of life, and the peak of that is a sweet life, while on the x-axis naman is the eudaimonia, the feeling of living with purpose, okay, and the extent of that is the dry life. But if you achieve equally the feeling of being good with a feeling of doing it in a good purpose, then it is said to be that you are getting this quadrant, the fulfilled life. Okay? So, yun. As discussed in the Nicomachean Ethics, okay, yan. Bakit siya Nicomachean? It is in honor kay doon sa gumawa niyan, and actually nakalimutan ko tuloy yung pangalan, the son of Aristotle. Nicomachean yung pangalan natin niya. Okay, so this is a philosophical inquiry into the nature of the good life for a human being. So that is Nicomachean Ethics. So we will also discuss that on the next topic, which is all about good life. But now let us focus first in human flourishing. Okay. As discussed by this Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle's human flourishing arises as a result of different components, such as itong phronesis. Okay? When we say phronesis, ito, the habit of making the right decision and taking the right action in context, and relentless pursuit of excellence for the common good. That is phronesis. Okay? A Greek word. And friendship, wealth, and power. In ancient Greek society, they believed that acquiring this will surely bring the seekers happiness. Okay? So kapag na-achieve mo ang mga components na ito, okay, in the Greek society, they believe that these qualities will bring you or bring the seeker happiness, which in effect allows them to partake in the greater notion of what we call the good. Okay, so kapag meron ka nun, then you are able or allow yourself to contribute in what we call the good. But remember, as time changes, elements that comprise human flourishing change, right? Because we are subject to the dynamic social history as written in our books, in the literatures, marami ang patuloy na nagbabago hanggang sa panahon natin ngayon. So people found means to live more comfortably, explore more places, develop more products, and make more money. And then, sabi nga, repeating the process in like a cycle. So, dati, in the beginning, people relied on simple machines to make hunting and gathering easier. Ganun lang kasimple. But because of this development, it allowed them to make more sophisticated machines to aid them in their daily endeavors. Okay? And eventually nga, nagkaroon na tayo ng mga space explorations, medicine innovations, and ventures of life after death. That is also part of our society. Okay? So our concept of human flourishing today are expected to become a man of the world. Yan na tayo ngayon, man of the world. For what reason? Because he is supposed to situate himself in a global neighborhood. Yung sinasabi nating globalization, working side by side among institutions and the government to be able to reach a common goal. Okay, so competition as means of survival has become passé. Pag sinabi nating passé, parang outdated na. But the trend now is coordination. Dati, competition during the Asian time, di ba? Pero ngayon, we have to coordinate with other people and generally coordinate with other countries. Kaya nga meron tayong globalization. And interestingly, there exists a discrepancy between Eastern conception and the Western conception regarding society and human flourishing. May pagkakaiba sila or may pagkakaiba silang point of view. So, if you will observe, the Western civilization or the Western conception tends to be more focused on the individual. Okay? Yan, more focused on the individual. While those from the East, okay, are more community-centric or focus on community as a whole. Human flourishing, okay, let's go back in the Western conception. Human flourishing as an end then is primarily more of a concern of Western civilization compared to the Eastern. Okay. Another is the Aristotelian view. Of course, because Aristotle is the one who founded the concept of eudaimonia or eudaimonia. While on the Eastern conception, they have the Chinese Confucian system, okay, yung Japanese Bushido, both of which the whole as greater their components. Next is the aim Look at their aim. The Western conception aim for eudaimonia as the ultimate good. There is kumbaga a focus on the individual to aim for this ultimate good, while on the Eastern conception they are encouraged to studies of literature, sciences, and arts for a greater cause. Okay, so kung titignan nyo siya, generally, meron silang talagang pagkakaiba. Of course, the Greek Aristotelian view aims for eudaimonia. Kasi syempre nga, it's from Aristotle. Okay? So now, we will move on to the science and technology and human flourishing. Every discovery, innovation, and success contributes to our pool of knowledge, finding proofs to trace evolution, one of the most prevalent themes. Okay, of course, that is, kumbaga, in science, di ba, when we talk about the history of science, we are finding proofs to trace evolution, kung kailan nagsimula ito hanggang ito, kaya nga meron tayong historical timeline on the science and technology advancement, because every discovery, innovation, and success contributes to our pool of knowledge. So human flourishing is deeply intertwined with goal setting relevant to science and technology. So paano naging connected ang human flourishing, okay, or intertwined with the goal setting relevant to science and technology? Okay, because science and technology is relevant as a tool in achieving human flourishing. Next, every discovery, the goals of both science and technology and human flourishing are related, that the good is essentially related to the truth. So science ventures its claim on truth. So paano naman natin masasabi that goals of both science and technology and human flourishing are related, and that good is essentially related to the truth? Remember, science, di ba, is a process to find something. Okay? So that is the truth. So paano ang kinalaman niya? Di ba sabi, that the good is essentially related to the truth. Sabi pa nga, inherently related to the truth. Why? Kasi when you are telling the truth, then it is a good behavior or a good attitude. Kasi, for example, in our life, in our daily activities, kapag ikaw palagi kang nagsisinungaling, eh, hindi masasabing mabuti kang tao eh. You keep on lying, hindi mo sinasabi ang totoo, hindi ka na paniniwalaan. To the point na masasabi na, napakaano naman nito, sinungaling, masamang tao. Wala lang ginawang tama, kundi magsinungaling na lang. Yan. So, kaya natin sinasabi na that good is essentially related to the truth. And science po is one way to reveal the truth. Yun nga, sabi dito, science ventures its claim on truth. Okay? Look, science as method and result. Okay? For the most part, science says, of course, reputation stems from the objectivity brought upon by this kind of methodology. Kaya nga tayong may tinatawag na scientific method in school, di ba? Kapag may science, meron tayong scientific method. It is introduced to us by our teachers para masabi na you are getting the correct data if you follow the scientific method. Number 1, ano bang steps nito? Kailangan kasi may idea ka ng scientific method because this is the general idea of how to do science. Why? Look, number 1, you have to observe and determine if there are unexplained occurrences unfolding. You have to determine the problem and identify factors involved. Formulate hypotheses that could explain the said phenomenon. Conduct experiment by setting up dependent and independent variables and try to see how independent ones affect dependent ones. So that's how you do experiment. Gather and analyze results throughout and upon culminating of the experiment. And of course, formulate conclusions and provide recommendation in case others would want to broaden the study. So, at least you have an idea about this because this is the routine in science. This is the basic methodology when introducing to experimentation and empiricism. Because sabi ko nga sa inyo, bago tayo bago makapag-produce tayo ng pwede nating i-claim as fact or truth, dapat dumaan siya sa process of science, scientific method. Okay, because throughout the course of history, there exist heavy objections on the scientific procedure. Why? Kasi meron kasing hindi naman gumagamit and then nagki-claim na ganito yan, like yung mga paniniwala without scientific basis. Halimbawa, bawal uminom kumain ng maasim kapag may menstruation ang babae. So, is there a scientific basis for that? Pero kung ang sinabi mo is dumaan sa process of scientific procedure, then there is the line that separates you doon sa non-scientific. Meron tayong tinatawag na pseudoscience. Okay? Na hindi naman totoo, kagaya ng example of pseudoscience is astrology. Okay? Mag-iba ang astronomy sa astrology because yung astrology, yan yung parang maghuhula ka nagpipredict ka ng mangyayari dahil sa ganito ang nakita sa langit. Okay, that is astrology, di ba? Ito ay gabay para sa ang lucky color mo ay. Okay, so that is pseudoscience. Okay? But if you as a student, if you engage yourself in scientific endeavor, dapat yung scientific procedure, yan ang dala-dala mo palaging armas. Okay? So next is verification theory. Kailangan natin itong i-discuss dahil similar to scientific method, these theories are helpful, okay, to validate facts. Okay? Para masabi mo kasi, di ba, human flourishing, dapat alam mo kung ano yung totoo. And tinuturuan tayo, okay, in this topic on how we can venture on claiming what is the truth. Okay? Because that will help us to attain eudaimonia. Okay, so what is verification theory? The earliest criterion that distinguishes philosophy and science. Okay, so this is the earliest criterion that distinguishes philosophy and science. The theory proposes that a discipline is science if it can be confirmed or interpreted in the event of an alternative hypothesis being accepted. And parang medyo madugo-dugo kasi parang malalim, di ba? Sabi dyan, the theory proposes that a discipline is science. Kailan siya magiging science? If it can be confirmed or interpreted in the event of an alternative hypothesis being accepted. So the theory gives premium to empiricism and only takes into account those results which are measurable, okay, and experiments which are repeatable. So let's have the Vienna Circle. This was espoused by a movement, okay, in the earlier century. We call it the Vienna Circle. These are a group of scholars who believe that only those which can be observed should be regarded as meaningful and reject those which cannot be directly accessed as meaningless. So yan yung magiging basihan. Okay? According to the Vienna Circle, only those which can be observed should be regarded as meaningful and reject those who cannot be directly accessed as meaningless. Okay, so in addition, Einstein's theory on the existence of gravitational waves would be dismissed due to lack of evidence. The American philosopher Thomas Kuhn warned us against the bridging the gap between evidence and theory by attempting to interpret the evidence according to our own biases. Later, i-elaborate natin ito. Ito, example. Suppose Leia has a theory, para mas magaan maintindihan. Suppose Leia has a theory that her classmate Ian likes her. Good, she thought. I like him too. But how do I know that he likes me? So, yun yung theory niya that Ian, her classmate, likes her. But sabi niya nga, how do I know that he likes me too? She began by observing him and his interactions with her. Several gestures she noted include his always exchanging pleasantries with her whenever they bump into each other, his big smile when he sees her, and greeting her even when riding a jeepney. So through these observations, she was then able to conclude that Ian does like her because she thought, why would anyone do something like that for a person he does not like? Okay, so ano yung naging conclusion ni Leia? Na mayroong gusto sa kanya si Ian because of yung inobserve niya kasi, di ba? So, okay na ba yon? Verified na ba yon? Okay, tama na ba ang conclusion ni Leia na gusto siya ni Ian dahil nga halos lahat tayo, no? Yung mga gestures, yung mga smiles and greetings, okay? And why would anyone do something like that for a person he does not like? Diba? Pero, as it turns out, however, Ian is generally happy to meet new people he knew. He has known Leia since they were in first year and regards her as a generally okay person. So upon learning that Ian basically does this to everyone, Leia was crushed. She vowed to herself that she would never assume again. So paano niya na-verify? Di siya, in-observe niya din si Ian based sa kanyang mga ginagawa sa iba ding na babae. And di ba, she found out that Ian pala is generally happy to meet new people he knew. Hindi lang pala sa kanya ganun si Ian, but to everyone. Okay? Generally happy to meet new people he knew. So ganun lang pala talaga, kumbaga ang naturalesa ni Ian. So upon learning that, Ian basically does this to everyone. So Leia was crushed. She vowed to herself that she would never assume again. So that is verification theory. Bakit? Hindi ka dapat agad maniwala kung ano yung nakikita mo sa kanya. Huwag ka agad parang maniniwala na porke ito grabe ang care. Yan, kaya marami ang mga na ano dyan. Dahil akala ganun na, yun pala hindi naman. So, for you to know the fact, kung talagang totoo na may gusto yun, you i-verify mo sa kanyang mga iba pang ginagawa. And Leia nga, found out na hindi naman pala gusto siya. Ganun lang talaga ang pagkatao niya. So you have to verify. Okay? Kaya siya verification theory. So, based from the story, is it justified for Leia to think that Ian does not like her? Is it justified? Kasi di ba sabi ko, i-verify muna natin. Huwag muna agad tayong maniwala or mag-assume. I-verify natin. But, is it justified for Leia to think that Ian does not like her? Ginigreet naman siya, di ba? Kaya lang, sa lahat, general. Okay, so let's have the second criterion para maano natin yung ito isang theory kasi dapat alam mo to pareho para makuha natin yung conclusion. Asserts that as long as an ideology is not proven to be false, okay, it asserts that as long as an ideology is not proven to be false and can be explained a phenomenon over alternative theories, we should accept the said ideology. Okay, so Karl Popper is the known proponent of this view. He stated that Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis is not testable and thus not falsifiable. To illustrate, previous story is restated. Yung kanina, remember, si Leia saka si Ian. So Ian is generally everybody's friend. He likes to be around people and aspires to become everybody's friend. However, there is this one girl, Leia, who seemed to dislike him when he is around. So every time he waves at her, she turns away. And when they are in the same room, she avoids glances. So he concluded that Leia does not like him, and he does his best to show her that he is not a threat. He began greeting her whenever they passed by each other at the corridor, and calling her attention when he was in a jeepney and saw her walking past. When they are able to talk to each other, he found out that Leia is just really shy and is not accustomed to people greeting her. So he then was able to conclude that his initial impression of her not liking him as a person is wrong, and the said proportion is rejected. So we can see how falsification method is prone to the same generalization committed by the verification theory. Kasi ito, di ba? Wait lang. The point is, di ba, he then was able to conclude that his initial impression of her not liking him as a person is wrong and the said proportion is rejected. Bakit po rejected? Kasi kahit nag-provide na siya eh. I mean, observable na ang evidences na Leia don't like me kasi nga iniiwasan siya, ayaw siyang tignan sa mata. But doing the things or para ma-falsify, okay, yung thought na yon para ma-confirm kung talagang ano siya, and at the same time ma-verify din. Diba? Hindi naman masasayang yung verification dito sa under falsification theory eh. Okay? So, because of the yung ginawa niya na parang nag-ano pa siya in-encourage niya yung sarili niya na alamin kung bakit ganun si Leia. Kumbaga, it encourage research, okay, in order to determine, okay, yung kanyang theory in mind. So para ma-falsify kung talagang ayaw sa kanya, o diba? Di napatunayan nga, na-falsify niya nga, na ayaw niya. Bakit? He found out na mahihain lang pala talaga si Leia. O diba? So, the difference between the two is that kapag, kapag verification, hindi porket nandun na yung evidences, yung kanina, hindi porket nandun na yung mga evidences na hindi porket nginingitian ka, yun na. You have to verify it. Observe mo yung other ginagawa niya or unless sinabi niya sa iyo bago ka mag-assume. Okay, sa falsification naman, kahit naglagay na itong si Leia ng mga evidences na ayaw niya nga doon, pero still na-falsify by yun nga, the things na ginawa ng lalaki na ma-falsify yung iniisip niya na ayaw talaga sa kanya ni Leia. So this is very important, okay, in scientific endeavor, okay, in order to attain human flourishing, because we have to be, or we have to attain what is the truth. So the process of science is knowing the truth. Okay? So kahit itong dalawa, okay, sabi nga dito sa reference na binabasa natin, there is no assurance that observable event or evidences are the manifestations of theories. So meaning, dapat yung mga scientists maging scientific. Okay? We have to be encouraged in the continuance of finding the truth. Hindi lang naman kasi itong verification saka falsification method ang pwede nating magamit. Okay? Kasi pwede ding pwede pa din silang mapagkamalian. Okay? So, paano natin? We have to, we have to be sure na yung truth na alam natin, okay, so this is very significant since these tools are ways po in validating the truth. Okay, so science is also a social endeavor. Sabi nga, sciences cease to belong solely to grown-wearing scientists at laboratories. Hindi lang naman ang science nasa four corners ng laboratory or kung ano pa mang klaseng buildings yan. Hindi lang naman yon. Science as a social endeavor. Okay, the new view perpetuates a dimension which generally benefits the society. For example, in South America, where many of the tribes remain uncontacted. O, nasa Amerika din yun, sa South America, but they do not regard Western science or yung modern science as their science. So whatever their science is, it can be ascertained that it is no way inferior to that globalized people science. So kung merong science ang Western, meron din naman itong science pa din ng mga taong ito na mga nasa remote places. Okay? Because it presents yung remember the indigenous knowledge system? Probably that is their own science. Hindi man yun tested by these technologies but tested through time, through experience. So that is already a fact from them. Okay? So thus, it presents an alternative notion that goes beyond the boundaries of hard facts of science. Okay? So, ang nandun sa mga places na yan, manifestation of shared experience, forging solidarity over communities. So, we can really conclude that science is a social endeavor. Science and results. Ito naman, pag-usapan natin. People who do not understand science are won over when the discipline is able to produce results. Sabi dyan. People daw po who do not understand science are won over when the discipline is able to produce result. Why? Sabi dito, science is not entirely foolproof such that it is correct 100% as of the time or always. Hindi naman. Science kasi 'di ba is a process. But you see, there are also kumbaga hindi naman foolproof na pag may nasabi na ano sa science, yan ba ang science? Sinasabi na fact palagi. Hindi naman. For example, yung weather reports niyan, sabi dyan. So it illustrates fallibility and limitations of their scope. Okay? Like for example, it is its inability to predict disaster. Yung weather reports, pag sinabing, bukas ngayon uulan, pero hindi naman umulan. Ibig bang sabihin, hindi na scientific? Okay, sabi nga, science is not entirely foolproof. Okay? Meron pa ding mga limitation siya. So, yung mga, sabi nga dyan, yung mga hindi nakakaintindi ng science, they thought that they win over. Okay? Or won over when the discipline is able to produce result. So science does not monopolize the claim for definite result. Remember, science is also dynamic. Okay? So yun nga yung ano natin dyan. Pero because of science and technology naman, ito nga, di ba sabi natin kanina, i-elaborate ko lang ulit. Yung weather reports, its inability to predict disaster. But what science can do? Kasi nga, inability to predict disaster. Kung kailan darating, eksakto, kung ano. But the best that can be done by science, of course, is to reinforce materials to be more calamity-proof and restore the area upon impact. Di ba mas mabilis na ngayon ang recovery ng mga nasasalanta ng bagyo, though hindi natin matuturo kung saan na lang pwedeng dumaan ang bagyo. Hindi naman. Pero we can do adjustments because of science pa din naman. Okay? Science as education. Aristotle, eudaimonic person, is required to be knowledgeable about science among other things of equal importance. Okay? So, science as education. Yan yung actually ang pinaka-highlight natin. Tingnan niyo po ha, Aristotle, eudaimonic person, is required to be knowledgeable about science, among other things of equal importance. And they are supposed to possess intellectual virtues that will enable them to determine truth from falsehood or good reasoning from poor reasoning. Okay? So, before I elaborate that, let us first consider a situation, halimbawa. In the Philippines, di ba, we have a lot of or a large distribution of science high schools. May mga sa DOST, may STEM ngayon na tinatawag, okay, that accommodates students with interest or inclination in science and mathematics. Okay? Bakit yan ang pinipili nila? Because one might infer that there are more demands on this field, and they are also preconditioned, di ba, that this field, yung sa science and technology, would land them into a high-paying jobs and lucrative career after graduation. So nag-aral sila ng mga hard sciences in the different prestigious schools. Pero hanggang sa dumating ang point na nag-graduate na sila from their field. Okay? So after some time, naghahanap na sila ng trabaho. Okay? Tapos, halimbawa, napunta siya dito sa isang, sabihin natin, isang company, sabi sa kanya. He was made to create, to parang support the article of Paul Feyerabend about how to defend society against science. Okay, so that is the title of the article na gusto niyang dapat i-emphasize niya na this art is, you have to stand dito sa article na to, how to defend society against science. Remember, in his or her past life, science ang pinukusan niya, and to the point na ito, i-defend yung society against science. So, kagaya nung activity ninyo na i-science dangerous, di ba? So, how are you going to defend science if you are a science-inclined person? May nagsabi that science is dangerous, ika. O ito naman, you have to defend society against science. So, yung estudyante, ano siya, parang, how do I do this? Parang nalito ang kanyang isip. So, yun. With that in mind, not all the time, kailangan nating tignan yung isang aspeto lang. Okay? So, kung ikaw ang nasa sitwasyon na ganun, how are you going to deal with it? Are you going to deal it with ano lang, ano yan, parang ipagtatanggol mo lang yung love of science mo? Are you going to refuse to consider the author's idea on science and ikikritik mo instead dahil nga I am taught to love science and science is the solution, the technology is the thing that can solve the problem in the world. So are you going to be parang yun nga, refusing dahil ikaw ay galing sa science high school and trained to regard science in a distinct accord? So what are you going to do? So, eto na, dito na papasok yung tinatawag nating human flourishing. If you is in a pursuit of human flourishing, yung happiness mo as a person, yung full bloom mo as a person, you have to make sense in viewing the world holistically. Because mastering science, halimbawa ikaw, you are major in science and engineering and math, ganyan. Simply mastering science and its allied courses would be inadequate if we are to say this is my point of view. Tapos yun lang ang paniniwalaan mo. No. Doon na yung sinasabi ni Aristotle. Person is required to be knowledgeable about science, among other things of equal importance. And they are supposed to possess intellectual virtues that will enable them to determine truth from falsehood, okay, and good reasoning from poor reasoning. A true eudaimon, okay, eudaimonia, recognizes that flourishing requires one to excel in different dimensions. So dapat you as a student should understand that you should not focus on one aspect alone. Halimbawa, may cellphone ka. You enjoy using your cell phone because it helps you with your education. Pero to the point na hindi mo na nakukonsider ang health mo because hindi ka na natutulog, meron ka ng bed procrastination, hindi ka na makatulog thinking about your gadget dahil you want to play, you want to watch. So, I don't think na magiging intellectually virtuous. Do you get the point? Okay? So, yan ang sa eudaimonia. Now, how much is too much? Last na ito, okay, this is about the MDG or the Millennium Development Goals. Okay, so in 2000, world leaders signed the Millennium Development Goals or the MDG. Okay, so that target its concerns. Okay, kaya nagkaroon tayo ng MDG dahil we don't want na ma-compromise ang ibang aspeto ng humanity because of science and technology. Of course, as a whole, we want humanity to flourish, not as individual lang. Okay, pero it begins with yourself. So ito na how much is too much, it's about developing countries. Forget developing poor countries. It's time to develop rich countries. So in order for you to understand the concept of how much is too much, okay, I want you to read the article by Jason Heikel, Forget Developing Poor Countries and It's Time to Develop Countries. So yan, maintindihan nyo yan kapag nabasa nyo na. What is the main point of the development? Okay? Kasi may kinalaman yan sa rapid pace ng technological growth. So, ano ang naapektuhan because of this fast moving advancement in technology? Di ba may pag-iiwanan na countries? Meron namang country na super unlad, may country naman na super poor. Do you see the extremes? Di ba? So, with this article, you will understand ano ang pwede natin gawin dito sa super fast. Tapos itong napag-iiwanan naman. Okay, so I want you to read on that article. Tapos, what is your stand in the article? Are you going to forget developing poor countries and it's time to develop rich countries, or let us continue developing these poor countries and let us kumbaga let us put these rich countries continue their advancements. Okay, so that is all for human flourishing. Thank you.